Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 9 team selection, and if you missed last week, I did indeed sell Erling Haaland on my wildcard. So we're going to discuss how the team looks now that it's set up without Haaland, if I have plans to bring him back in, and what I plan on doing with my transfers. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel, or maybe you are new to the channel, please do consider subscribing. Make sure to drop a like on the video as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So very briefly, just how we got on in Game Week 8, and this does feel like an age ago because we've had an international break. I played my wildcard in Game Week 8. Yes, I sold Erling Haaland, and yes, it was a big green arrow, but to be perfectly honest, it's not because I sold Haaland that I got a green arrow. In fact, the Haaland draft that I built, I think would have ended on about 67, 68 points as well. So regardless if I had Haaland or if I didn't, the team would have probably still got a green arrow. And the reason for that is because I was absolutely confident that Salah was the only essential player in a wildcard. I said on multiple occasions that I thought he was more important than Son and more important than Haaland. And I also maintained that he was the best captaincy option last week. The game against Brighton just looked perfect. And I wasn't sure about Son's minutes, his fitness, and also the game against Luton away, I didn't think was the best on paper for him. And yes, you can get those calls wrong, and Son did have opportunities to get attacking returns. But it always feels amazing when you're very confident about a decision in FPL, and that ends up paying out. So to be honest, whilst the team did do pretty well, and a lot of my players returned, pretty much the main reason for that big green arrow was Mohamed Salah's 15-pointer. And I'm absolutely delighted that I did choose to go with him on the wildcard, as did most people. Outside of that, there was a lot of 5 and 6 pointers, right? We've got Turner 6-pointer, Udogie 6, Trippier 6, Maddison 6, Watkins 5, Darwin 5. The only 3 players or 4 players that blanked was obviously Son, and then Cash, Fernandes, and Alvarez. So I'm very happy with the way the team performed. And very briefly before we move on to my team, and we will probably discuss this throughout the weeks too, around why I sold Erling Haaland, it's not because I don't think he'll do well. In fact, Erling Haaland is comfortably the best captaincy shout in Game Week 9 and Game Week 11. Like, I don't even think it's a discussion to be had. I don't think that Haaland will stop scoring. I don't think he's a bad option. I just think that there are really good captaincy alternatives every single week, especially with Salah playing the way that he is at the moment. So that's one thing. I think there are other players that you can captain. And I think by dropping Haaland and spreading the funds, my team in its entirety, with Salah captain most weeks and some other alternative captaincies in there, I think across the next period up until about Game Week 15, will outscore a team with Haaland in it, captaining Haaland a lot of those weeks and having the funds a little bit tighter. So it's just more that I think my team in its entirety will outscore a Haaland team in its entirety. It's not me saying that I think Salah will outscore Haaland. It's not me saying that Haaland won't be the top point scorer across this period. It's about the team in its entirety. And I do think that this team has enough in it to offset the fact that I am going without Erling. And I guess the things that I've managed to get by going without Haaland is obviously I've got Trippier in there. I've got Watkins in there as well. Most drafts wouldn't be able to get both Trippier and Watkins, and they both obviously returned in 8. I've managed to get Darwin and Fernandes, and I know Fernandes people won't agree with. We're going to discuss Fernandes in the next section, but that price point's lovely because I now have a really nice price point to switch to the likes of a Martinelli, to the likes of a Saka without having to sell Son and Maddison. So I've got a really nice price point in that midfield. I also have 8 attackers. You can see that I actually have Jared Bowen on the bench as well, and some people won't like that. They'll say I've got a benching headache, but I'm looking at it as I've now got 8 attackers that I can move to other players, and I've just got ultimate flexibility. So people will maybe look at this and go, so basically you sold Haaland to get Darwin and Fernandes, and that's not it. I would have had to also drop one of Trippier and Watkins, and I love both of them. I wouldn't have had those 2 really nice price points in Watkins and Darwin to move to other players around those prices, and I wouldn't have also had an 8th attacker, and I probably wouldn't have had a 4th strong defender too. So it's about much more than just going for Darwin and Bruno instead of Haaland. It's about how I can set my team up for the future with future transfers as well. But all of that to say, Game Week 8 went very well, but to confirm, that isn't because of Haaland or no Haaland. I think the big thing in Game Week 8 was Salah captain, but this is also to show that Haaland isn't an automatic captain every week. And I know you could say it's Arsenal, of course he was never, but the week before he blanked against Wolves. And I know Rodri hasn't been there as well, but I think there is a chance over the coming weeks to go against Haaland, and that's what I'm banking against. So let's now take a look at my team for Game Week 9. So we did kind of start talking about the team a little bit in the previous section, but let's talk about the team specifically for Game Week 9 and which players I'm happy with moving forward. And then in one of the future sections in this video, we are going to talk about the players that are currently on my watch list that I would like to bring in between sort of Game Week 9 and Game Week 11. Who are the players that I regret not going with, or players that I know I want to try and move to? Because as we know, there is a fixture swing in Game Week 10 in particular. And I myself had always planned to keep my wildcard until Game Week 10. 10, but I was forced into playing it early because my team absolutely was just so stinky. So I kind of had to play it. But Game Week 10 in particular is always the week that I was worried because there are quite a few fixture swings. And for example, the likes of Arsenal and Brighton and West Ham have really nice fixtures from 10 onwards. And I currently don't own many of their players. So these are the things that I need to think about. I am currently lining up in a 3-5-2 this week as opposed to a 3-4-3. And as you can see, I do have Darwin tucked as first sub. And we will discuss Darwin in a little bit of detail because I know a lot of people want to know that I either already own him or are maybe tempted on a punt on Darwin about whether I think he'll start in Game Week 9. And you can probably tell what I think the answer to that is. I have 0 in the bank and 1 free transfer. So obviously I've just wildcarded. So a very likely option is that I roll, but that isn't a definite option. And just because of how flexible my team is, 2 free transfers is useful, but it's not always necessary because one of the reasons that you usually do want 2 free transfers is not only to attack fixture swings, but quite often you have to upgrade and downgrade certain players to try and move the funds around. But when you have 8 attackers at really nice price points and 3 defenders at really nice price points too, sometimes you can make a lot of the moves that you want in one single move. So you don't always need the 2 free transfers. But I'll discuss all of that throughout the team. As you can see, it's currently rated at 94% according to Fantasy Football Hub. I'll be honest, any algorithm that you put my team into, they won't massively like it because I've sold Erling Haaland, or at least a lot of them won't, because Haaland is the best player in FPL. He's got the best data. He doesn't have the best fixtures, but he is a 90-minute man on penalties with exceptional data, playing in the best attack in the league. So I'm not surprised that my team rating has dropped a little bit, but that is the risk that I am taking. So, starting in goal, I've got Turner and Areola. Of course, this is a week that you would hope that Turner will be playing. Now, do I expect Turner to keep his place indefinitely? Probably not. I think there will be a point that he might lose out because I don't think that Forest bring in the keeper that they've brought in if he's not going to be getting a lot of first team minutes. I just don't see them playing Turner every single week. But to be honest, clean sheet last week, Turner's actually playing decently. He's made a couple of mistakes, but probably not enough to justify being dropped. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Turner keep his place, but I don't think it will happen forever. I am really hoping that this week in particular, I've got Turner, because this is a week where I do not expect Areola to keep a clean sheet against Aston Villa, but I do expect Turner to keep a clean sheet against Luton because it's one of the better fixtures in the league. So fingers crossed Turner plays, but if not, I do have Areola coming on, and at least I will have a playing goalkeeper. I love my back 3. I'll be entirely honest. Cash, Udogie, Trippier. All 3 of them are incredibly attacking. Cash and Trippier in particular are in the top 3 for defenders for expected goal involvement this season in the Premier League. Matty Cash is actually top. Matty Cash has the best data out of all defenders in the Premier League this season. And whilst he's arguably got the most difficult fixture on paper out of Udogie, Trippier and Cash, I don't really care. Matty Cash is going to be one of those players that, unless he's playing against the likes of Arsenal, Liverpool, City, probably those 3 teams, maybe like a Newcastle, I suppose, I'm going to play Cash every single week because the attacking data is similar to that of some of the attackers and forwards and midfielders that we're picking in our team. So there's sort of that funny cliche saying that we clean sheets are just a bonus. Sometimes we say that about defenders when they concede, almost as a bit of a joke. But with Matty Cash, it sometimes does feel that clean sheets really are just a bonus and you are owning him for the attacking return. So as long as Cash continues to be as attacking as he has been, he'll be in my team almost every week. And I will favour him ahead of defenders with better fixtures just because of how attacking he is. And a lot of people will discuss this in the deadline decisions video probably, but lots of people have tons of issues in their defence. Maybe you've got like 2 or 3 flags or players that you want to sell. Matty Cash would be absolutely top of the priority list for me if you're bringing in defenders this week. So with the fixtures they've got, with them being sort of a mid-table side for defensive data, Aston Villa, and with the attacking threat that he has, you've got to get Matty Cash in your teams, in my opinion. Trippier, this is one of the reasons I was delighted about going without Erling Haaland. If I had Haaland, Trippier was going to be the one that I sacrificed. Obviously, he picked up an attacking return last week yet again. That is now, I think, 5 assists in 3 games. And Crystal Palace at home, this looks like one of the best fixtures in the league at the moment from a defensive perspective. They've got loads of injuries to their key attackers, obviously Eze being the main one. Palace just don't look like scoring goals. And even if they do score a goal, we know how good Trippier is going forward. So whilst I'm not expecting Trippier to keep up the rate of return of getting 5 assists in 3 games, I am still thinking he's a very good attacking threat and he's a very good chance for clean sheets over the next few. I've seen some people wondering, should they go and break their teams to get Trippier in? I'm not so sure. I mean, you have missed a lot of the better fixtures for Newcastle, and he is very, very expensive. And unless you are going without Salah, Son, or Haaland, and in particular, Salah or Haaland, it's going to be very difficult to get Trippier into your team without sacrificing some of the very good attackers, like a Saka, like a Watkins. So I love Trippier. I'm delighted that I've got him, but I don't think he makes sense in tons of teams unless you are dropping one of those 3 kind of premium assets. But I do love him. Delighted that I've got him. I do think if you're looking for an outside captaincy shout, by the way, I don't like captaining defenders because if they lose their clean sheet, even if they get an attacking return, you need almost like 2 or 3 attacking returns to really make it a good haul. And that just doesn't really happen with defenders. So really, you need a clean sheet and an attacking return to make it a monster haul. And whilst Trippier has that in his locker, I don't like relying on the clean sheet because they are very, very unpredictable. You can think that's an absolute banker for a clean sheet. And we've seen in the past teams still concede. So if you're looking for a differential captain, I don't mind it. But for me, I would prefer to go for an attacker. And then Udogie does get the nod ahead of both Taylor and Gahey. Udogie's data isn't as good as it was at the start of the season. Pedro Porro is most definitely the Spurs defender to own at the moment if you're going for one. His goal threat is significantly higher than Udogie's. But Udogie is still popping up in the right positions, right? He's on the edge of the box. He's in the box. Yes, the data doesn't suggest that he's getting lots of clear-cut chances, but he is the kind of player that if you popped up with an attacking return, you wouldn't be surprised at all. And I'm delighted to have him in my team as well. If I was wildcarding in 9 or 10, in 9, maybe you would still pick a Spurs defender. In 10, I'm not so sure I would, because the Spurs fixtures, the best ones, were in Game Week 8 and Game Week 9, right? And we've had those 2 now against Luton and Fulham. And whilst Palace isn't, I think it's Palace in 10 that they've got, whilst it's not a bad fixture, you certainly wouldn't look at that and say that you need a Spurs defender. And then after that, the fixtures do deteriorate slightly. So I think this is the last really good fixture for the Spurs defender, and I'm hoping that he does do pretty well. As I said, I do have Taylor and Gahey on the bench. Gahey obviously got the 9-pointer last week, which I did miss out on, and I'm just really happy to have a Crystal Palace defender because I do think they are a pretty good defence, and hopefully once they do get some of their attackers back, they can build on their season and have a strong season, because I do like Palace, and I do like what Roy Hodgson's doing at Palace as well. So very, very happy to have Gahey, and I do think he'll probably get a couple of price rises very soon alongside his teammate Anderson. And then Taylor was just a cheap defender that I could fit into my team with very limited budget that plays every week. And I actually don't think it's a bad fixture against Brentford. Brentford have been struggling slightly, but I hope that I won't need Taylor and Gahey this week. So that's the defense. I'm very, very happy with it. We'll discuss in the final section of the video some of the defenders that I would like to add, because I do think that I am missing a few key defenders, specifically an Arsenal defender, but we'll discuss that in the final section. I'm happy with it for this week. 4 home fixtures. Let's move on to the midfield. So moving on to the midfield 5, and there is quite a bit to unpack here. And so I will just start with Jarrod Bowen, because this is a player that I am delighted to have. He was on my bench last week, and as you can see by the fact that I now have Darwin benched this week, I do have 8 attackers, and that does, of course, cause a benching headache in some weeks. But the thought process behind this is that especially if one of your 8 attackers is someone like a Darwin, that there is a good chance that he's benched sometimes. And even if that isn't the case, normally one of your 8 attackers has a weaker fixture. And while sometimes it can be unpredictable when players will return, you just back the fact that if that player has a weaker fixture, then they're the one that you bench. So yes, benching headaches are difficult psychologically because seeing points on your bench is quite difficult. If I've got the money to do that and it provides me with flexibility with future transfers and it allows me to not play players that have difficult fixtures, I actually quite like it. I wouldn't say necessarily that I'll do it every single week across the season because most of the time you can't afford it. But when you can, I don't see a massive issue with it other than the fact that, again, psychologically it can be difficult to see points in your bench every week. But Jarrod Bowen this week will be playing in my team unless we get early team news that Darwin starts, and then Jarrod Bowen may be the one to miss out because I think out of the 8 attackers, Aston Villa away is probably the most difficult fixture, but Villa are still conceding goals, and like I said before in the Matty Cash section, I would say they're like a mid-table defence. So do I expect West Ham to score? Yeah, I would probably guess if I was to predict the way this game would go, I would say like 2-1 to Aston Villa. I could definitely see West Ham grabbing 1 or maybe 2 goals. And if that is the case, Bowen is, of course, involved in a large percentage of those goals. So I have no issue playing Bowen this week. I'll just bring up their fixtures next to me. So the reason that I really have Jarrod Bowen is Everton, Brentford, Forest, Burnley, Palace are the fixtures from Game Week 10. And in particular, that Everton, Brentford, Forest, Burnley run. Those 4 fixtures are absolutely brilliant. And I really, really did want Jarrod Bowen. So whilst I wildcarded in 8, and I knew that he had obviously Newcastle and Villa in 8 and 9. I knew from 10 I would want Bowen. So it was almost about saving myself a transfer. And I still think he's great. Like, the data is still there. He's still sitting at a 0.56 non-penalty expected goal involvement. He gets 90 minutes every single week as well, which a lot of other players don't get. So good minutes, good fixtures, good data. There's very little to dislike about Jarrod Bowen. And of course, he could be playing through the middle very soon as well. There have been rumours that Antonio will drop to the bench. Bowen will go through the middle, and it'll actually be Kudus on the right. And if that is the case, then again, that does make Jarrod Bowen a really nice option. So for all of those reasons, I really like him. If I was wildcarding in 9 or wildcarding in 10, I still think Bowen would be in my top 5 midfielders. So really, really happy to have him in the team. I then do have double Spurs midfield. Now, again, if I was wildcarding in 10, I almost definitely wouldn't have Son and Maddison. But this is still a really nice fixture to have them against Fulham at home. So I am very, very happy to have the two of them. My massive concern is around Heung-min Son. I actually had my captaincy on Son throughout the international break because I wanted to captain him. When I look at the fixtures, and we'll discuss captaincy when we move on to Salah, but when I look at the fixtures for Son and for Salah, for me, the Fulham at home fixture is the better fixture. So if I could choose and both were fully fit and available, I would captain Son this week. But I just don't know that he's fully fit. I mean, he played on Tuesday in the international break, and he was limping as he went into half-time. He did not look comfortable at all. He came back out in the second half, played the full 90 minutes, got a goal in the second half as well. But then again, around 75, 80 minutes, he was limping again. So he just doesn't look fully fit. And I just don't understand why both the national team and Spurs seem to be playing him when he looks like he's injured. But we've got a similar situation with Bukayo Saka as well, where these players just appear to be getting run into the ground. And it doesn't sit right with me. But obviously, there is a reason for that. And obviously, the physiotherapists are clearing them, and these players want to play. But Son's just doesn't look like he's going to get enough minutes. So if we look at his minutes in recent game weeks, he's got 75 minutes last week, 68 the week before, 78, 79, 71. So the last time he got over 80 minutes was in game week 3. And I would say that this is probably due to this reoccurring injury that he's got and the fact that he isn't fully match fit. That isn't necessarily an issue when it comes to owning him. Am I happy owning the number 9 for Spurs in this Ange Postecoglou team, which is incredibly attacking, with decent fixtures, and the player that we predict is probably on penalties? Absolutely. I don't think the fact that Son's only getting 75 minutes is justification to sell him. But is he such a great captaincy option when he's only getting 65 to 75 minutes? No, probably not. And it does put me off captaining him, because if I think Son is a slightly better option than Salah this week, but Salah gets 90 and Son gets 70, I would rather 90 minutes of a slightly weaker option in Salah than 70 minutes in a slightly better option of Son, in my opinion, especially when Salah is such a good alternative. And if you own Erling Haaland, then you probably just captain Haaland. But it does mean that he's no longer a captaincy shout until he gets back to full fitness, if he can get back to that place. So I love Son. I'm still going to have Son in my team. I have no issue with keeping him for the foreseeable future, but it does make me question his role in my team, because I don't have Haaland. So I was kind of relying a little bit on a captaincy rotation between Salah and Son. And at the moment, I just don't feel comfortable with that. I do obviously have Maddison as well. And I love Maddison. I'm happy having Maddison too. I will have to make the decision probably in game week 10, maybe in game week 11, where one of Son and Maddison are probably going to get sold. Right? We'll discuss the midfielders I'm looking at in a second, but I'm looking at the Arsenal mids. I'm looking at Matoma. I'm looking at Diaby. There are tons of midfielders that I would like to own from game week 10. And I just don't think with the mixed bag fixtures, I can justify spending all of my money on Son and Maddison. But I would like to probably keep one. So if the minutes still continue to be an issue for Son, and maybe they look even lower, maybe this week he only gets 60 minutes, then it probably will be Son sold. If Son's fitness starts to improve, and it looks like his minutes will get closer to 80 to 85 minutes, then I do think it'll be Maddison that makes way, which is crazy to say because the data's there. He ticks along really nicely. He's still getting attacking returns. And he's absolutely critical to what's going on at Spurs at the moment. But I just think when we've got teams like this, you have to target the fixtures. And whilst the fixtures aren't bad, if we look at their fixtures coming up, from game week 11 onwards, they've got Chelsea, Wolves, Villa, City, West Ham, Newcastle. Could I see goals in some of those games? Absolutely. But Chelsea are a really good defence this season. Villa are a bit mid-table. And obviously that could be a decent game as a result, but I'm not expecting a lot of goals. City away is a terrible fixture. And then West Ham and Newcastle, I'm not expecting a ton of goals again from Spurs there. So You could justify keeping one. You could maybe even justify keeping both. But when I look at the fixtures for the likes of Saka and Matoma over that spell, I feel like I would rather own one of those two. So one of Son and Maddison will be getting sold, probably in Game Week 10, maybe in Game Week 11. I just need to see what happens in Game Week 9. I want to hopefully see Son get 90 minutes and not look like he's slightly injured. And if we don't see that, it may well be him that makes way, because I just don't trust him with captaincy at the moment. And when I don't trust him with captaincy, is he worth paying 1.5 million more than Maddison? Maybe not. I would love to know what you think down below of Maddison and Son, but that's sort of my thought process at the moment. I don't think I can captain Son this week, but very happy to own both of them for the Fulham at home game. As you can see, at the moment, my armband is on Mohamed Salah. I don't actually like this, right? And last week, I was seeing Salah's praises. I told you, in my opinion, he was definitely the best captaincy shout. And lots of you agreed with me and did the Salah captaincy. And we were laughing. We were loving life. I don't like it this week. So you might be like, why is your captain on him? And it's unfortunately, and this is the issue with having no Haaland, I don't see another viable alternative, really. And the reason that I don't necessarily love this is actually Everton are one of the better defences in the league this season for expected goals conceded. They've not actually conceded that many chances to their opponents. And you can say whatever you want about Pickford. I don't think Pickford's such a shocking keeper that that's the reason. I think they've just got slightly unlucky to concede the amount of goals that they have. So I don't think this is a terrible defence that they're playing in Everton. I don't think Everton are a great team, by the way, but I don't think they are a terrible defence. It is the early kickoff. And we know that Klopp really doesn't like the early kickoff. And Liverpool's record has been a bit hit and miss in the early kickoffs as well. The other reason is I don't think Darwin will start. And I do prefer Salah when Darwin is in the starting 11. And I don't think that just the Everton fixture in general is a fixture that massively suits him. I like the fixtures where he's playing against the likes of an Aston Villa or a Brighton, teams that actually push up the pitch and leave space in behind for Salah. And whilst I don't think Everton are like a massively low block team now, they're certainly not a team that are going to press all the way up the pitch and constantly leave space for Salah. So for all of those reasons, I don't necessarily think that he's the standout captain, which is why I kind of wanted to captain Heung-min Son. But I don't see massive alternatives. And I suppose to give you the pros of captaining him, his data is exceptionally good. This is at home. He has been involved in pretty much every single goal that Liverpool has scored this season. He's on penalties. His minutes are good. There are lots of reasons to really, really like him as well. I'm a little bit skeptical because this wasn't a fixture that I was planning to captain Salah. I was actually planning to captain Son, but unfortunately I can't do that this week. Let me know down below if you think I'm overthinking that. It's not that I think Salah's a bad option. It's just I think there maybe are a few doubts around it that I'm just not so sure. Again, I will keep saying this. This isn't reverse psychology. If I had Erling Haaland, it is such an easy decision. I said the same last week when Salah played against Brighton. I will say the same again this week when Haaland plays against Brighton. Brighton are really not a good defence. And Brighton also do struggle against quite physical number 9s. It's one of the reasons that Darwin actually got a couple of chances against Brighton too. So I think Haaland is the standout captain, but sadly I don't have him. So at the moment, the captaincy armband does fall on Salah. And then the fifth and final midfielder I've saved until the end is Bruno Fernandes. It's one of those, I said this in my deadline stream and in the video where I talked about selling Haaland. The way that I am now playing the game is I play the game the way I want to. And one of the mistakes that I've made across the first 7 game weeks before my wildcard is I was doing things with the comments section in mind. I was doing things with making sure that my audience were happy with my decision making. That isn't the way that I got to the amount of subscribers that I've got or the way that I got previously pretty good ranks in the last 2 years. I finished 10k last season by making decisions that I thought were the best ones. And I think that Bruno Fernandes is a fantastic FPL option. And I've been scared to say that in recent weeks because of the amount of negative comments I've got. But in all honesty, I don't care because that is my opinion. I think that if you look at the data, the fixtures, the minutes, the penalties, I don't care what you think about Man United as a team because that doesn't matter. What matters is Bruno as an individual asset. And people keep saying that like he underperforms his data. Across his career, Bruno Fernandes is not an underperformer of his data. He actually tends to overperform at points. So I would expect that if Fernandes keeps putting in the performances that he is, the attacking returns will come very soon. And I mean, this week he's got Sheffield United, right? It is the best fixture on paper. I'll try to remember to flash it on screen because I saw an absolutely brilliant graphic on Twitter. Sheffield United are the worst team in Europeans' top 5 leagues by some distance. And this graph that you're probably going to see on your screen is a combination of expected goals conceded and expected goals going forward. So it gives you a bit of an idea about how good they are defensively and how good they are sort of going forward as well. And teams that are in the bottom left of the graphic are poor defences and poor attacks. And what you can see most importantly is Sheffield United are the worst defence out of all of the teams in the top 5 leagues. So on paper, obviously, if it was at home, it would be slightly better. But on paper, this is the best fixture that you can get in Europe's top 5 leagues. So there is no way I'll be selling Fernandes. I actually genuinely think in any other normal season, Fernandes is probably the obvious captaincy option this week. But I will admit that Manchester United in general have been underperforming as a team. And the fact that it's away as well does put me off slightly. But I think Fernandes is a great option this week. I think if you have him, you definitely don't sell him. I wouldn't be going out and buying him, but I am very happy to have him. The other reason that Fernandes is in my team, as I spoke about in the first section, is it's a really nice price point. Let's say that actually I decide I don't want to sell Son. I then need to try and get Saka into my team. Now, if I do Maddison to Matoma, I've then got that really nice Fernandes price point where I can go, right, Fernandes to Saka, nice and simple. I could even potentially afford, if I made 3 moves from -4, Maddison to Martinelli, Fernandes to Saka. Right, I've got lots of different options there, and I would have to make one further downgrade, something like Darwin to HAALAND if I wanted to. But I've got lots of different ways that I can now move my midfielders about. So as much as I think Bruno Fernandes is a great option, and I picked him specifically with this fixture in mind, and I wouldn't even mind holding him, I also had in the back of my mind that I like his price and I like the option to be able to move him to an Arsenal midfielder in game week 10. So that is obviously at the back of my mind as well. So I'm actually delighted with my midfield. There are midfielders that I would love to own, which we'll discuss in the final section of the video. But this week in particular, I mean, 3 really nice home fixtures in the middle, Bowen and Fernandes, if I have to play them. Let's now discuss the 2/3 forwards and why I'm currently in a 3-5-2. So guys, moving on to the forwards, and we will start with the man that is currently first sub, which is Darwin. Now, if Darwin is starting in game week 9 and we get confirmation of that, of course, Darwin will be in the starting 11. And as I said before, it probably will be at the expense of Jarrod Bowen. I actually, as a result, don't mind if Darwin's benched because I quite like the idea of playing Bowen. But at the same time, because I do have Matty Cash in my team, and because I do think that this isn't necessarily a particularly easy fixture for West Ham, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them score 0 or 1 goal, I don't mind the idea of benching Bowen as well. So I'm kind of happy either way. What I hope that we get is confirmation. And Liverpool are the early kickoff in game week 9, as we spoke about in the Salah section. So the 12:30 kickoff, which means that, especially with Liverpool, we often do get early team news. There is a very good chance that before the deadline, we will know if Darwin's starting. So I don't really need to hypothesize too much. But just in case we don't, the reason that I've currently got him on the bench is because Uruguay did play on, it's basically Tuesday evening / the early hours of Wednesday morning, and their game ended at about sort of 2 or 3 a.m. And Darwin did play 90 minutes for Uruguay. And there was a tweet, I'll try to remember to flash it on the screen, from Jack, who is like a Liverpool journalist. And he said Darwin is unlikely to start for Liverpool versus Everton on Saturday. He's revealed that he suffered from cramp late on in Uruguay's 2-0 win over Brazil. That plus a long-haul flight back and early kickoff suggests a spot on the bench. Now, to be honest, apart from the fact that he got cramped, which often happens, there's no new information there. We knew that he would be playing very, very late on or the early hours of Wednesday morning. We knew that Liverpool the early kickoff. We know that last time that happened, although I think their game was slightly later, we know that last time that happened, Darwin was on the bench, and Klopp commented on the fact that even by Friday, he hadn't actually seen Darwin. So we always knew there was a very good chance. And I didn't mind that because I've got 7 other very good attackers. So for the time being, Darwin's going to sit first sub for me. If he comes off the bench and I need him from my bench, I actually think there's a good chance Darwin gets a return. And of course, like I said, if we get confirmation he starts, he will come into my starting 11. I don't think I'm going to sell him, because I've already got Bowen, right? I don't think there are many other players that I would want desperately instead of Bowen. It would probably only be HAALAND, but do I want to bring in a second Man United attacker? Maybe not. And actually, HAALAND's data hasn't been that great thus far. And then going into game week 10, I'll have a little bit of a think. Do I think Darwin will start in 10 if he didn't start in 9? And do I want to maybe start to think about selling him, or am I going to keep him for a little bit longer? So I'm very happy with having Darwin in my team, but I don't necessarily think that he's going to start. My major issue is Alvarez may not start as well. Now, Alvarez, I don't think played 90 minutes, but he did play most of the game. And again, he played on the early hours of Wednesday morning. And once again, Man City do play on Saturday. Now, they play at 3 p.m., but I don't think there's a massive difference there. The only difference with Man City in comparison to Liverpool is that Alvarez has done it before, where he returns very late, gets a single session in with Man City, and then goes on to play 90 minutes in the following game in the Prem. So I don't know if it's to do with the way that Pep views it in comparison to Klopp. I don't know if it's to do with Alvarez's recovery rate, or due to the fact that maybe Man City have fewer players that can cover the position that Alvarez covers. But I'm maybe slightly less worried about Alvarez, but that is also a worry, right? Any of the South Americans that went away and played on international duty have a chance of missing out. So Alvarez and Darwin could both potentially prove issues for me. I just hope, I suppose, that if Alvarez isn't starting, there's not much of a chance of it, but I suppose there is a small chance that we get early team news there as well. So I could be left in a position where 2 of my 3 forwards don't start. And if that is the case, hopefully I'm lucky with them either not featuring or coming off the bench and getting an attacking return. With Alvarez, I did discuss Alvarez in the Game Week preview video. I don't necessarily think he's an essential option. His data is good, not great. But the next 3 fixtures against Brighton, United and Bournemouth, I'm pretty happy keeping Alvarez for those 3 fixtures. But I do have him in there as a player that from Game Week 12, I don't mind selling to free up some funds. So that's the situation on Alvarez and Darwin. It's not ideal, but it is what it is. We always knew this would be the case. And then my third forward is Watkins. Watkins is a player that, and I said this before his 23-pointer, I just expect him to tick along really nicely. I don't think he's ever a captaincy shout for me because apart from, I think once last season with a 17-pointer and then once this season with a 23-pointer, apart from those couple of incidents, Watkins just gets between like 5 and 9 points most weeks. And then he'll get the odd 2-pointer. Then he'll get like a 3-pointer. And he'll go back to like a 4 or 5-pointer. And he just ticks along. He's not even that great for bonus points. He's not on penalties. But across a 10-game week period, if you just hold Watkins in your team, especially with the fixtures that they've got coming up, you could see 1 or 2 double-digit hauls. And then outside that, he might just tick along really, really nicely. And I think in Game Week 10 against Luton at home, that's obviously a really, really perfect fixture for Ollie Watkins. So I am delighted that I picked him in my team. And he's also at a really nice price point where if I do need to downgrade him, it will free up some funds as well. So there you go. That is the team. Currently in a 3-5-2. May end up switching to a 3-4-3. And again, I am delighted that I went without Haaland. Whatever happens this week, you can't judge how successful it is. Even if genuinely, and I mean this, even if Haaland scores 5 goals against Brighton, you can't judge whether this has been successful or not because he may well blank us for the upcoming games where my alternative captain outperforms him, right? And if Salah gets a couple of goals and Haaland also gets a couple of goals, and my players that I've chosen in and around that, Trippier, Watkins, Bowen, Fernandes, because I wouldn't have been able to squeeze them all in if I'd gone without Erling Haaland, then if I'd gone with Erling Haaland, I should say, then it still may be worth it. So to put that all together, Haaland is the best captaincy shout. This is the week that I am most scared and most worried. So I know there'll be people in the comments like, Raptor's trying to convince himself that he's made a good decision. I don't know if it will be a good decision or not, right? It may be a terrible one, but I am still happy with it. But this is a week I am absolutely petrified, right? I'm not going to sit here and say, I'm really happy having no Haaland for this week. He's the best captain. He's got the best fixture on paper. I expect at least 1, probably 2 or 3 attacking returns. And I don't think I have a brilliant alternative captaincy option in this week. So this, for me, even more than Game Week 11 when he's playing Bournemouth at home, this is the issue. This is the week where I am going to be very, very lucky to get away without a big red arrow. I mean, I would take right now a grey arrow. If you said you just hold your rank for this week, I'd be happy because next week, I'm happy not having Haaland. In Game Week 12, 13, 14, 15, I am very happy not having Erling Haaland in my team. So this is just a week where us people that went without Haaland, we've just got to hope and pray that he doesn't do crazy damage and that whoever you choose to captain instead manages to get close to him. So that's the way the team looks. Let me know what you think of it down below in the comments. Now let's move over to my watch list to just take a look at the players that I'm currently considering bringing in around Game Week 10 or Game Week 11. So I'm not going to spend too long on this section because I'm really not considering making many transfers this week because I just don't think I need to. So generally I am planning to roll this week. And I think usually if you do wildcard the week after, you are hoping that your team's in a position to roll. So unless we get some major injury updates post-international break, that is the most likely situation. But I did just want to discuss some of the players that I'm looking at specifically from Game Week 10 and Game Week 11 onwards to bring in. The first is an Arsenal defender. I do desperately want an Arsenal defender in my team. So White, Saliba, Gabriel, maybe even Zinchenko if he looks like he's playing most games. I think the most obvious one is Saliba, right? He is more expensive than Gabriel, but I think for good reason because there is still a chance that Arsenal revert back to trying this party inverted role. And if they do that, we know that Gabriel isn't necessarily going to start in the team. So whilst he is cheaper than Saliba, and whilst he probably carries more attacking threat as well, it may be worth paying a little bit extra just for safety of minutes. But Ben White has looked pretty attacking recently as well. He could be a really nice option if you can stretch to him. And Zinchenko tends to have better data than Saliba and Gabriel and White when he does play. So one of those could be making their way into my team around Game Week 10 to, let's say, Game Week 12. The other defenders are, I do like Pedro Porro. But again, as I said, I feel like you sort of missed the best fixtures for Spurs now, and I already have you doggy, so probably not considering him there. I've also got Lewis Dunk in there. If Estepinian is back, he's an option too, but we know how good Brighton's fixtures are coming up, so I'm considering a Brighton defender. And also Tsimikas, right? We don't have a specific time frame on how long Robertson is out for, but he's picked up what looks like it could be a bad injury. Sounds like he's going to need or has had surgery very recently. And if Tsimikas is available for the next 4 to 6 weeks as an option, it could be worth going for him. I mean, it's probably short term because it's probably only for, I would imagine, probably only 4 to 6 game weeks. It could be even less than that. But if it looks more long term than that, and it looks like Tsimikas will be the starting left back for Liverpool, I think he's 4.4 million. He could be a really, really nice option. So Tsimikas is in there, and I guess I'll assess it over the coming weeks and decide if I want to make a defensive transfer. The midfielders is where I would really like to make 1 or 2 transfers because there are 4 midfielders that I would absolutely love to get in my team. Saka, Martinelli, Matoma, and Diaby. Saka and Martinelli is a must, right? One of those 2 will be making their way into my team for Game Week 10 because I want an Arsenal attacker. And also that fixture in Game Week 10 against Sheffield United and the fixture in Game Week 12 against Burnley, they are serious captaincy shouts. And at the very least, you probably want to own a player from that team. So Saka and or Martinelli will be making their way. I've actually considered maybe both in Game Week 10. Just currently leaning Saka at the moment, just due to the safety of minutes and also that he takes some of the penalties for Arsenal. Not every penalty, but at least some of them. And then outside that, I think I do prefer Matoma to Diaby at the moment. That isn't to say that I dislike Diaby, or that I think Diaby's a bad option, but Matoma's got slightly better data, and I just think he's a slightly better FPL asset. The issue is that I think Diaby is probably slightly more nailed on to start games for Aston Villa. He could come off early, but more nailed on to start, whereas I think there's a chance Matoma does miss 1 or 2 games due to European commitments. So at the moment, 2 of the very likely transfers in 10 and 11 is Saka and Matoma. And then forwards-wise, there's a really good player at the moment. I don't know if you've actually considered him. Maybe he's a bit of a differential. Is Erling Haaland that I may need to bring back in at some point. So, of course, he has to be on my watch list, but I'll be honest, if Haaland scores 14 goals against Brighton, that doesn't make me want to bring him in. Right? I know full well he's probably going to demolish Brighton. Him demolishing Brighton doesn't make me want to bring him back in because my plan was never to do so. So there's very few things that I can think of other than maybe a Son or Salah injury that would make me even semi-tempted to bring Haaland back in. So for now, he's not really an option, but I've put him there because, of course, I am considering it. I do like HAALAND, either for this week or in Game Week 11 when Man United have a really nice run of 3 fixtures. So HAALAND could make his way into my team. I just don't see the data there to back it up at the moment. It's more of an eye test pick than a data pick. Then João Pedro. Surprisingly, you might be like, why is João Pedro one of your most sort of wanted players? It's his price, right? I've looked at moves where Darwin down to João Pedro in the future makes it much easier to get a route back to Haaland or to move a certain, maybe if I want to go from Bowen to Saka at some point, I can do that. So I've got my eye on João Pedro because he's on penalties. Brighton are one of the best attacks in the league. The fixtures are there. If he starts almost every game for Brighton and gets decent enough minutes, it might be worth the risk at his price. Gabriel Jesus is in there as well. Let's say I can only get one of Saka and Martinelli, and I also maybe want to sell a Darwin or want to sell Alvarez. I do have Jesus as an option in there, assuming that he can stay fit. And then Alexander Isak, whilst his minutes are not secure, if we get an injury to Wilson, Isak could be a serious option. And if we get an injury to Isak, I guess the equivalent, Wilson, could be a really decent option too. So these are some of the players that I'm considering. Genuinely, though, my 3 main issues that I want to address in Game Week 10 and Game Week 11, I'd like an Arsenal defender. I'd like Saka, and I'd like one of Martinelli, Matoma, and Diaby to pair along with the Arsenal defender and Saka. So these are the things that I'm thinking about. These are the moves that I'm likely to make coming up. But for now, I don't necessarily need to make that move. If we just move over very, very briefly to Fantasy Football Hub, they obviously have their AI recommended transfers every week. And if you do want access to all of the data that I use throughout my videos in every single video, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. You can currently still get 30% off at Fantasy Football Hub if you sign up for one of the annual deals. It truly is worth it for me. It's a site that I genuinely use every single day, and they actually have a really cool app as well, so do check it out, link in the description. But they actually recommend banking the transfer. So as you can see at the top, they say banking a free transfer for this week probably makes sense. But if you were to make a move, they say that there is a slight, and you can see by the graph, it is very slight, advantage by moving Bowen to Diaby, mainly because they weight the more immediate fixtures as more important. And this week in particular, you can see that they rate Diaby as being a slightly better pick. So maybe there is the possibility to do that. And that is one of the things that I thought about on my wildcard. Do I go Bowen? Do I go Diaby? For me, I just think Bowen's minutes are more secure than Diaby, and he's got slightly greater goal threat. So I think when you say, who would you rather, a player with slightly greater minutes and slightly greater goal threat or the alternative, you go for the player with slightly greater goal threat and minutes. But I would say maybe the fixtures are slightly better for Aston Villa than they are for West Ham. But for me, this is an option. I think we're all in agreement, probably you watching this video as well, that the most obvious move for me is to roll the transfer this week, which means that going into Game Week 10, I'll have 2 free transfers to use. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 9 team selection video. And you can tell, I'm so excited by FPL at the moment because it's a bit of fun. And yes, Haaland could absolutely demolish my rank, but then next week we'll be back again for the same. And it's just spicing it up a little bit. And there won't be many opportunities in FPL to go against Erling Haaland across the next few years until he leaves Manchester City. So I'm going to make the most of it. And I'm enjoying FPL at the moment, which is the key thing. And if you've enjoyed today's video, please do smash the like button. Let's aim for 2,000 likes on today's video. And make sure to subscribe as well. I do really appreciate it. Until next time, which will be tomorrow's video, the deadline decisions for Game Week 9. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.